Think of a block of marble, cold, heavy, seemingly unyielding. It holds within it a million possibilities, yet in its raw form it is incomplete. It is defined more by what it is not than by what it is. For so long, many of us have lived as if we are that block of stone. We point to the chisel marks left by our past, the criticism that carved a groove of doubt, the loss that left a fissure of grief, the expectations of others that shaped our edges. We look at these impressions and we say, this is me, this is my fixed, unchangeable nature. But what if we have misunderstood our role in this entire process? You are not the stone, you are the sculptor. The stone is your raw material, your history, your emotions, your habits, your thoughts. It is real, it has weight and texture. It can be difficult to work with, but it is not the artist, it does not hold the vision. It does not wield the tools, you hold the tools, your attention is your chisel, your choices are your mallet. Every single day you stand before this raw material of your life, and in every moment you are making a choice. When you choose to question a limiting belief, you are striking a precise blow, carving away a fragment of fear. When you choose compassion over self-condemnation, you are smoothing a rough edge. When you choose to begin again after a setback, you are refining the form, finding a new line of strength you didn't know was there. This work is quiet, it is patient, it often happens in the solitude of your own mind. There will be days when your arms ache with the effort. You will make mistakes, the chisel may slip, taking a piece you meant to keep, but the stone is deep, and forgiveness, for yourself, for the process, is the sandpaper that allows you to continue. Do not confuse the sculpture for the sculptor. The scars and marks are part of the material, but they do not define the artist's hand. Your power lies not in being a perfect, polished, finished piece, but in your capacity to pick up your tools each day and continue the work. The masterpiece is not a distant destination. It is the act of creation itself. It is the courage to stand before the unformed potential of your own being and to decide, consciously and deliberately, what you will carve away and what you will reveal. So, feel the weight of the mallet in your hand, feel the cool, sharp edge of the chisel, and begin, not with the entire statue in mind, but with the very next small strike. You have always been the artist. Your life is your atelier. Now go back to work. We often move through our lives with a profound and limiting sense of passivity. We narrate our own stories from the perspective of the object that was acted upon, the substance that was shaped. We point to the grooves and contours of our personality, our quickness to anxiety, our tendency towards self, doubt, our defensive reactions, and we trace them back to their origins. This deep channel of insecurity was carved by the constant criticism of my childhood, we might say. Or this jagged edge of cynicism was formed by that one significant betrayal. We treat our character as a geological record, a stone tablet upon which our history has been permanently inscribed. This perspective is understandable, even logical, but it contains a catastrophic error of identity. It mistakes the medium for the maker. It confuses the raw material with the artist who holds the vision and the tools. This misidentification is the root of a pervasive powerlessness. If you are the stone, then you are inert. You are subject to the elements, to the accidental blows of circumstance, to the weathering of time. Your form is determined by external forces. Your story is one of endurance, not creation. Your only agency lies in interpreting the marks left upon you, in crafting a narrative that explains why you are so rough in this particular spot, or why you have a fissure running through your center. You are a museum piece of your own past, and your primary task is conservation. But the radical, life-altering truth is this: you are not the stone, you are the sculptor. The stone is real. It is the undeniable raw material of your existence. Your genetic makeup, your core temperament, the cultural environment you were born into, the traumas and the triumphs you have experienced, this is your block of marble. It has a specific weight, a particular density, veins of hardness and softness that will respond differently to your tools. To deny this material is to be an incompetent artist. A master sculptor does not look at a piece of Carrara marble and wish it were limestone. They learn its nature, they study its grain, and they work in dialogue with its inherent properties. Your agency, your power, and your freedom reside in the shift from seeing yourself as this material to embracing your role as the one who works upon it. The stone does not hold a vision for itself. It does not decide which form to reveal. It simply is. You, the sculptor, hold the vision. You possess the imagination to see the potential form hidden within the unhewn block. And most critically, you wield the tools. Your conscious, focused attention is the chisel. Every time you observe a habitual thought without getting swept away by it, you are positioning the chisel with precision. Your will, your intention to change, is the mallet. Every time you make a choice that aligns with the person you wish to become, rather than the person you have been, you are striking a deliberate blow. A fragment of the old form falls away. It is not an act of violence against yourself, but an act of liberation, the careful removal of everything that is not essential to the true form waiting within. The realization that you are the sculptor is a profound shift in consciousness, but it remains a beautiful abstraction without the tools to make it real. A vision without an instrument is merely a daydream. The true power of this metaphor lies in its tangible, practical application. You already possess the fundamental instruments for this great work. Your primary tools are your attention and your choices. Your attention is the chisel, the sharp, focused point of awareness that you direct onto the raw material of your life. It is the instrument of discernment capable of making fine, precise cuts. Your will, your capacity to choose, is the mallet, the driving force that provides the impact, the energy to create change. Consider how these tools operate in the quiet workshop of your daily life. When you find yourself gripped by a familiar anxiety, the raw material of your mind presents a solid, intimidating block of fear. If you are passive, you simply become that block, heavy, cold, and immovable. But when you remember you are the sculptor, you pick up your tools, you apply the chisel of your attention to the thought itself. You observe it with curiosity instead of panic. Ah, this is the anxiety about my presentation. I feel it tightening in my chest. This act of mindful observation is the first precise placement of the chisel. It creates a separation between you and the emotion. You are no longer the anxiety. You are the one looking at it. Then you wield the mallet of choice. This is not a single heroic blow, but a series of small, decisive strikes. The choice might be to take one deep breath. The choice might be to focus on the single, manageable first step of your task rather than the overwhelming whole. The choice might be to recall a past success, actively replacing the narrative of fear with a narrative of capability. With each small choice, you strike the mallet. A tiny fragment of the monolithic fear breaks away. The form begins to change. The process is repeated with the rough stone of resentment. The chisel of attention examines the story you've been replaying. The mallet of choice decides to release the narrative, to write a letter you will never send, or to consciously wish the other person well. A rough edge is smoothed. This is the active, ongoing work of self-creation. It is not about waiting for inspiration to strike, but about showing up at the studio each day and putting your hands on your tools. Every moment you consciously direct your attention away from a destructive thought and toward a constructive one, you are carving. Every time you make a choice that aligns with your values rather than your impulses, you are shaping. The stone does not transform in a single, dramatic moment. It changes through the cumulative effect of thousands of small, deliberate strikes, each one guided by the vision of the sculptor you have chosen to become. The masterpiece is not a distant, finished object, but the dignity and power found in the very act of wielding your tools with purpose. The work of the sculptor is not the work of a single afternoon. It is not defined by a moment of dramatic, explosive change where the form is revealed in a cloud of dust and flying chips. That is the stuff of cinema, not of life. True sculpting, the kind that transforms unyielding stone into a form of grace and meaning, is a patient, persistent, and deeply private practice of refinement. It is a daily return to the studio, a recurring choice to pick up the tools even, and especially, on the days when you feel your hands are clumsy and your vision is clouded. This is the quiet, unglamorous discipline that separates the enduring masterpiece from the fleeting gesture. This process lives in the small, almost invisible choices of an ordinary day. It is the decision, upon waking with a familiar dread about a difficult task, to consciously carve away a fragment of that fear by focusing only on the very first manageable step. It is the act of smoothing the jagged edge of a sharp temper by inserting a single, deep breath between the trigger and the reaction. It is the patient refinement of a self-critical thought, sanding it down with a moment of compassionate understanding. These actions are not grand. They do not announce themselves. To an outside observer, they might look like nothing is happening at all. But inside the artist's workshop, each of these moments is a deliberate strike of the mallet, a precise cut of the chisel. It is the cumulative effect of these countless micro-actions that gradually, inexorably, refines the rough block into a form of increasing clarity and strength. This journey is inherently imperfect. The stone has a will of its own. It contains hidden fissures and unexpected hard spots. The chisel will slip. There will be days when you take a strike with the mallet and a piece you meant to keep shears away, leaving a gash you did not intend. This is not failure, it is part of the process. The inexperienced artist may see this as ruin, a reason to abandon the work. But the master sculptor understands that these flaws must be integrated into the new form. They become part of the sculpture's unique history and character. The work is not about achieving a cold, sterile perfection imagined in a distant fantasy. It is about the courageous and ongoing conversation between your highest vision and the stubborn, beautiful, imperfect reality of your material. The goal is not to eliminate all evidence of the struggle, but to create a whole that is wiser, more resilient, and more authentic for having endured it. The finished piece, should it ever be called finished, will be all the more compelling for the marks of its own becoming. The path of the sculptor is not one of flawless execution. It is a path marked by the sound of the chisel slipping, the sight of a fragment breaking away in an unintended direction, the discovery of a hidden fissure in the stone that challenges the entire design. We often approach self-improvement with the expectation of linear progress, a clean, upward trajectory free of setbacks, but the stone of our being is not a passive, compliant substance. It has its own nature, its own history of fractures and densities that we cannot simply wish away. To believe otherwise is to set ourselves up for a particular kind of despair. The despair that comes when we make a mistake and interpret it not as a part of the process, but as proof that the stone is irredeemably flawed, or that we are incompetent artists. This is where the essential tool of forgiveness must be applied. In the sculptor's studio, forgiveness is not a nebulous spiritual concept, it is a practical, functional necessity. It is the sandpaper and the polishing cloth. When the chisel slips and a gouge appears where a smooth curve was intended, the sculptor does not throw the entire piece away. They assess the damage, they put down the chisel and pick up the sandpaper. They begin the slow, patient work of smoothing the jagged edges, of integrating the mistake into a new, adapted design. The gouge becomes a gentle hollow. The unintended crack is incorporated as a defining feature that gives the sculpture unique character. This is the active practice of self-forgiveness. It is the conscious decision after a lapse in judgment, a return to an old habit or an outburst of emotion, to not abandon the work. It is the compassionate understanding that the stone is difficult to work with, and that the artist is still learning. Without this tool, the work grinds to a halt. Perfectionism is the artist who, after one misplaced strike, lays down their tools forever, staring in shame at the marred stone. But the master sculptor knows that every piece is a dialogue between vision and material. The final form is always a collaboration between what the artist intended and the reality of what the stone revealed about itself along the way. The scars and repairs are not hidden. They are testaments to the journey. They are evidence of resilience, of the commitment to continue shaping even in the face of imperfection. When you forgive yourself for your stumbles, you are not condoning them. You are simply picking up the sandpaper. You are accepting the reality of the mistake and committing to the patient work of refining the form from its new, altered state. You are proving your dedication to the long-term project of creation, a project that is far more profound and beautiful than any fleeting ideal of perfection. The most compelling sculptures are not the ones that appear untouched by human hands, but the ones that bear the gentle, honest marks of the hands that made them. We often fall into the trap of believing that the purpose of this sculpting work is to arrive at a finished masterpiece. We imagine a distant future version of ourselves, perfectly polished and displayed on a pedestal, free from flaws or further need for work. We toil under the weight of this expectation, chipping and sanding with the hope that one day the work will be done. But this is a misunderstanding of both art and life. The most profound truth for the sculptor is this: the masterpiece is not the final, static object. The masterpiece is the active, ongoing, and courageous process of creation itself. A sculpture placed in a museum is, in a sense, complete. It has entered its afterlife as an artifact to be observed, but you are a living work. Your material, your consciousness, your spirit, your understanding, is continually evolving. To seek a final, polished form is to desire your own completion, which is another word for stagnation. The true value, the real beauty, and the deepest meaning are found not in the destination, but in the relationship between the sculptor and the stone. It is found in the daily decision to show up at the studio of your own life. It is in the focused attention you bring to your own growth. It is in the resilience you discover when you forgive a mistake and integrate it into your evolving form. This process is the masterpiece. This shift in perspective is everything. It liberates you from the anxiety of not being there, yet you are exactly where you need to be in the middle of the work. The joy is no longer contingent on achieving some perfect future outcome, but is accessible in the present moment, in the very act of shaping. There is dignity and purpose in the simple motion of the chisel, in the sound of the mallet, in the feel of the sandpaper. This is where you cultivate patience. This is where you practice self-compassion. This is where you build resilience. These are not byproducts on the way to the masterpiece. They are the very substance of it. When you embrace that the process is the purpose, every challenge becomes part of the art. A period of difficulty is not a deviation from the plan. It is the discovery of a new, more complex vein in the marble, demanding a more nuanced technique. A moment of failure is not a ruinous flaw. It is a new contour that adds depth and story to the overall form. You begin to see your entire life as this dynamic, unfolding creative act. The goal is not to eliminate the work, but to fall in love with the craftsmanship, the steady, mindful, deliberate practice of becoming. You are not working towards a moment when you can finally put down your tools. You are learning to wield them with greater skill, grace, and intention for a lifetime. The masterpiece is the ever-evolving record of your own courageous participation in your becoming.